Greetings, I am Conservative Review's Nate Madden, and today I'm interviewing Rebekah Johansen Bydlak, primary candidate for the Republican nomination in Florida's 1st Congressional District. How are you, Rebekah?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So you said you're coming from a candidates forum today.
I am, yeah. I got to talk to some voters out in Navarre. It was really exciting to hear what the issues that matter to them and to hear from voters who are going to be deciding in August who's going to be the next representative. I think that it was a great chance to have everyone hear from a crowded field and get some fresh perspectives in there.
Fair enough. So I was told on background you're actually pretty young for a congressional candidate. Is that true?
I am. I'm 25. I'll be 26 in August. So if elected, I would be the youngest ever female representative, and I would be actually the first female ever to represent the district. So I would make history, I think, in two ways. But honestly, the more important thing to me is I want to make history by cutting spending and debt. You know, that hasn't happened in a very long time, and we need people in there who know how to do it and how to get things done. And so that's a big reason why I'm running. Is I see 19 trillion reasons why government has failed, and I want to do something about it.
Well, let's talk about some of those reasons. Can you tell me what motivated you to run for the seat in the first place? Is there a story there?
Yeah, so I mean, Pensacola is my hometown, born and raised, and I care very much about who's gonna represent my hometown in Congress. My background is as director of outreach for the Coalition to Reduce Spending, so I've worked with elected officials, with federal candidates across the country, and members of the public to get people to really understand the spending issue and take it seriously, as well as hold people accountable when they don't take it seriously. And so I know how hard it is, and I know the situation in Washington is not promising for a lot of reasons, and that's why I think it's important to get people who have the energy and the dedication to getting government down, getting spending down, for the next generation. My generation's on the hook for what these guys in Washington have been doing, and so I want to make sure that I can change that for the future.
So was there ever a moment when you were working at the Coalition, was ever an instance where you looked at something and thought, wow, this is exactly what is wrong with the D.C. system, and this is why I need to go home and run for Congress? Did you ever have a moment like that?
Well, I guess the better question is when I didn't have those moments. I mean, honestly, it's constant, it's pervasive how deep and entrenched the spending problem is, and it's not just Democrats. I mean, a lot of the establishment in my own party, unfortunately, doesn't take the spending issue seriously enough, and we have votes where people just kind of are expected to sign, give up, and vote to raise the debt again, or vote for another big omnibus that breaks budget limits yet again, and I think that's a major problem. I was asked at the forum today about congressional power over appropriations, and what I said is, well, a little secret is that Congress really doesn't exercise much power over appropriations. When you're in Washington, it's a very lackadaisical attitude towards actually doing the job of Congress. Oh, well, I guess we'll get an omnibus again. Well, that's not how it's supposed to work. Congress has these powers for a reason, and the system should work. It shouldn't be something that you just put off till it's too late and you pass another big pork-filled bill.
Well, yeah. So in addition to the spending problem, what are some of the other issues that you're primarily concerned about?
Well, government across the board is broken, and it doesn't serve the people of the 1st District for sure. You may know that Florida's 1st has a very large population of veterans, and veterans know better than most people what happens when government gets too big and doesn't take care of people. The situation with what recently happened with the VA is not actually recent. It's been going on for years. I have many friends who've dealt with just inhumane wait lines and not being able to get care and just dealing with the bureaucracy that is government-run health care. And it's a shame. If you want to see what Obamacare is going to look like in a few years, you probably should look at the VA. And going back to what we saw yesterday from McDonald, it's just absolutely outrageous and incredibly obvious that the leadership still does not take this seriously enough. That he would come out and say, well, Disney doesn't measure wait times, so why should we? And first of all, Disney does measure wait times, and second, I think if Disney employees end up killing people, they'd probably get more than a cushy taxpayer-funded bonus. And people in the 1st District get that, and I think I want to continue the work that Representative Miller did toward pushing for real accountability, and that's something that all fiscal conservatives and all small government conservatives should care about.
Also, on your website, you listed improving education as one of the key planks of your primary platform. Why is education so important to you?
Well, it's personal for me, to be honest with you. I was educated at home from up until college, and so I grew up knowing what happens when the government steps too far and tries to help. And I kind of knew from a very young age that government is not the solution, it's the problem. And so education freedom is the most personal issue for me, and it has been my whole life, as well as school choice. As the daughter of a teacher, I know how important it is to get solutions not only for people who are able and willing to home educate their children or send them to private schools, but also for people who can't. We have to give people better choices because it's our future we're talking about.
Well, let's dive into that a little bit more specifically. Mm-hmm. Looking at the education debate at the federal level, what are some of the problems that you see that you can call out by name, and what are solutions to those problems, or what would freshman Congressman Johansen Bydlak do to take those on?
Well, I mean, it's honestly, whenever the federal government steps in and gets involved in health in education policy, it's kind of a problem. Whether we're talking about Common Core or No Child Left Behind, Congress has a bad habit, or the federal government has a bad habit of trying to pass standards and mandates that oftentimes are not funded and not well thought through, and leaving districts and states to deal with the cleaning up the mess. And so I think the first thing that I can do as a federal representative is to get out of education policy and stop trying to meddle and stop trying to push these standards from afar that really won't do much to help educational achievement.
Now, some school choice advocates in Congress have said that one of the big things to do in that case is to defund and dismantle the Department of Education. What's your take on that?
Well, I think they're right. I do want to defund and dismantle the Department of Education, and I think all conservatives should agree with that. I mean, if a department is judged by its results, then the Department of Education should have been defunded a long time ago, and it's time to be serious about that and actually push forward getting that done away with.
And you also got healthcare listed here. You said Obamacare must be stopped. Now, what does that mean for your agenda specifically? Does that mean what specific policies do you think need to be enacted or repealed in order to stop the ill effects of the so-called Affordable Care Act?
Well, it's a very personal issue for me as well. In a couple of years, I think I'm going to lose my insurance. My husband had lost his insurance right after the ACA passed, and a lot of people are in the same situation of dealing with the effects of a law that was passed without everyone's best interest in mind. And so with the coalition, I fought not only to repeal Obamacare entirely, but also to deal with specific parts that we can take on in the meantime, whether we're talking about risk corridors. I've worked on ending the insurance bailouts, and I think that while we push for repealing the law entirely, we should also work and get rid of the insidious things we can in the meantime. But we also have to keep in mind that it's about solutions and caring for people, and the status quo is not something that we should go back to either. Healthcare costs have risen, and there's a great deal of bureaucracy before we had the Affordable Care Act, and that's part of why people thought that we needed that. And obviously it was not the right solution, but people should be allowed much more freedom than they had before to go and get insurance and negotiate across state lines and try to deal with some of the root causes that led to Obamacare in the first place.
So are you suggesting that healthcare is actually a market that has to deal with forces such as scarcity, supply, and demand, and that artificially messing with those drives prices up?
Well, that would be crazy. No, I mean, absolutely. I think we've seen that. We've seen that over the years. It's one of the clearest examples of what happens when the government starts meddling in places it doesn't belong.
So I'm looking at a few different articles.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing, the North Escambia profile of you,
mm-hmm.
it talks about, you talk about how people have had enough of political insiders.
Yes.
So you've worked in D.C. for the past 3 years, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So what is then a political insider to you? I mean, it seems we're in the middle of an election cycle where the term is being wildly thrown about, and it seems like even a Republican candidate for president who was, who fought the United States Senate at every turn could be called a DC insider at points.
Right.
What then is the proper functional definition to you?
Well, I think it comes down to outcomes, right? So when you see people supporting politics as usual and government solutions instead of the free market, then it's a pretty safe bet that they're probably an insider. And so I think the voters realize what they're up against with the establishment, and it's what I realized very quickly working with the coalition to reduce spending, how entrenched and insidious this political establishment is, and how it honestly can swallow up even good people who want to do the right thing and don't realize how hard it is to do it. And so for me, it's pretty obvious to judge what a political insider is because you got to look at results and look at the kinds of things that these people support and whether they listen to the voters or their special interests.
And along those lines, I'm also reading reports that you've signed a term limit pledge. Is that true?
Yes, I did. I'm very proud to have signed the term limit pledge. I hope my fellow candidates. Yeah, well, I mean, I think Congress needs fresh blood. It needs new solutions. The old system, the good old boys who've been in there for years and years is obviously not working. And so I think pushing towards a larger scale solution and pushing for a term limits amendment is absolutely a step in the right direction. So that's why I'm proud to have signed.
So what would be an ideal limit for you?
Well, I mean, I think there have been a lot of options that have been suggested, whether it's 2 terms or 4 terms. It's really what we can get is going to be better than the status quo. Good people maybe shouldn't term limit themselves and let the bad people stay in. We should make everybody be forced to be held to a limit, I think.
Well, that was going to be my next question. What do you say to those? How does that comport with the idea of the elder statesman, the guy who goes in and he fights for his district and he fights for his state? What's the argument against that in that context?
Well, I think, like I said, we do have some good people who've been there for a long time. Maybe not many of them, but given the fact that they are in such a minority, I don't think that it's the best situation for the good people to leave while the bad people stay. And so that's why I support term limits across the board for everybody, not just the people who are already principled.
All right. So I guess in getting close to the end here, I'm curious. This is a pretty crowded race as it looks. I'm looking at a few sources. I'm counting currently 6 or 7 contenders for the nomination. Am I?
I believe so. I haven't checked if someone has dropped out because, of course, qualifying is coming up, so that will change the field a bit. But I do expect it to stay pretty crowded. Okay.
So, and when you look at the list, that you can find on Ballotpedia or any of the other sources, the open sources that report on this, there's a state senator in the race, there's a state representative in the race, there are a couple veterans running in a very high high active duty area. Of course, there's flight school down there. What sets Rebekah apart from the rest of the primary field?
Well, it's about solutions, and it's about what I will be pushing for and what I have pushed for in my career prior. I'm a fiscal conservative advocate. I'm not a politician. I'm not a political insider, and so I think voters are looking for fresh faces and new ideas, and I hope that I'll be able to provide that. I'm aware that it's a crowded field, and I hope that the voters will listen to what everyone's saying very carefully, but I'm pretty confident that I offer a fresh perspective for the kinds of things that the 1st District is going to care about.
All right. Just in closing, what are those top 3 of those fresh ideas? The 3 policies that you really want to hammer hard. The 3 things that are going to be your issues, not just issues, but the 3 specific policies that you would just say off the back of the napkin. This is what I think needs to happen right here in Congress. What are those?
Well, I think we need reform of the way that we spend the people's money, and so that encompasses a lot of issues. But there's a reason why we keep hitting the debt limit, we keep raising the debt limit, we keep spending more, we can't pass budgets. The rules are broken and the incentives are broken, and I want to take on both. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, and the budgeting system is completely insane. We need to take on not only the waste, fraud, and abuse, but also the complexity that makes it so hard for the fiscal conservatives we do have to actually pass budgets. And so I want to push forward optimistic reforms that can kind of rein in the baked-in spending increases that we see every year. And then I also want to take care of my district. So my district very much feels the effects of Washington out of control and big spending, and it also feels the effects of when the bureaucracy doesn't take care of veterans or doesn't take care of children who need a better education or educators. And so pushing Washington out of the way and letting the states and localities take their rightful place and being an advocate for their rights as first district representative is one of the most important things that anyone can do, and that's what I'll do.
All right, well, thank you, Rebekah. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we close up here?
Well, I would love for people to go to my website at Rebekah2016.com and find out more about me, and I want to be an active member of my community and in Congress or out, and I want to be, accessible, and I'm a member of the community. I have just as much at stake as anyone, and that's why I want to get government down.
All right, well, thanks, Rebekah. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for calling.